All right, we are going to get started with our info session. My name is Alicia Johnson. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the National Organizer and Student Network Manager here at Americans United for Separation of Church and State. I am the manager of the Youth Organizing Fellowship, which is why we are here tonight to talk about what this program is all about. And to get some more insights into it from not just me, but a couple of our current fellows who I will welcome in just a moment. A couple housekeeping things first, though. We are working on getting our ASL interpreter here on video ASAP, but they'll be joining shortly. And we also will have closed captioning available. You can start that at any time by clicking at the bottom of your screen. We are recording this webinar, so thank you if you are joining us here live tonight. Thank you if you are watching this later. We are going to take questions from our audience. If you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A box or the chat at any time, and we will get to those at the end. Please hold for one more second while I work on making sure our ASL interpreter can join us. There you are. Amazing. Thanks for working through the technical difficulty. We are going to this evening have a conversation, me and two of our current fellows. And you will get to hear more about them, what they've been working on, their experience in the fellowship. And then I will just give an overview of the application process, the kind of program calendar, what to expect, before we then turn it to you for questions. Without further ado, I am going to invite Aiden and Alex to join me in the chat so we can talk more about the Youth Organizing Fellowship. Awesome. So if you are at this webinar, you probably know the Youth Organizing Fellowship is a year-long program for folks ages 18 to 25 who want to learn more about church-state separation, develop as leaders and advocates, and implement some kind of project that spreads the word about church-state separation to their communities and mobilizes people to take action and advance our mission of creating more inclusive communities, advancing inclusive religious freedom and church-state separation, no matter where you live, no matter who you are. So I'm going to invite Aiden and Alex to tell us a little bit more about themselves. Let's start with Aiden. Who are you? Where are you? Tell us something about yourself and about why you decided to join the Youth Organizing Fellowship.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Alicia. And hello, everyone. You're making a good choice by being here. My name is Aiden. I use he, him pronouns. I'm currently a junior at Harvard College. Right now I'm home in the great city of Taunton, Massachusetts. We're moving, which is why there's nothing behind me. But yeah, so I think that I've always sort of been vaguely interested in issues of religion and government for two main reasons. First, I'm Unitarian Universalist, which is a small tradition, so no hard feelings if that's unfamiliar. But it's a tradition that believes very strongly that all of us have wisdom to contribute, and that all the many religious traditions of the world have something that we can learn from. And I believe very strongly in pluralistic democracy because of that, which I really believe that church-state separation upholds. And I'm also queer, and especially when we look at our society today and see who is sort of being attacked most explicitly with sort of exploitations of religious language, it's very often LGBTQ people. And those have always sort of been on my mind, but it really was the summer of 2022. I was working at a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and that was the summer when all of the pretty bad Supreme Court decisions were coming down. Roe v. Wade was overturned. There were cases about coercive school prayer, and religious schools being funded with public money that made me realize just how pervasive church-state separation was. and how pervasive violations of church-state separation were, I should say, and how necessary it was. Um, so I applied to the fellowship that year, and I did not get it. And then I applied again the next year, and I did. So let that be a lesson to you. Stick with it. It's been a fantastic experience. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, we definitely encourage people to reapply if not selected the first year. And Alex, tell us about you and why you joined the fellowship.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Alex Santiago. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a first year at UC Santa Cruz studying politics and Latin American studies. Um, I was looking back to my initial application actually in preparation. I was realizing, I guess, how much my view of church-state separation has shifted since I initially applied for this fellowship. I guess I didn't realize the full pervasiveness of it. I'm from a small town in California that, like, what initially piqued my interest, I suppose, was like seeing how funding allocations were kind of biased in my state or in my city. And I saw that as an obvious violation of church-state separation. Um, but I guess through the fellowship, that's kind of evolved to like be more nuanced, I guess. You kind of see how it's like, I don't know, a little bit more subtle in other capacities. And so initially that's why I joined the fellowship. But as I was like doing research, and applying for it, I guess I realized like all of the different issues that it encompasses that like also intersect with my own beliefs. I'm really passionate about advocating for immigrant communities, and there are intersections between church-state separation and immigrant communities, um, which was part of the reason that made me want to apply. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you shared how your perspective shifted because when we talk to applicants and when I talk to the program about applicants, I want people to understand that we want to hear your ideas. We want you to have a sense of like, what might I do in this fellowship to advocate for church-state separation? And you're so welcome to change those ideas, and you're encouraged to learn and think creatively and brainstorm and like find potentially new ways that you might bring church-state separation to your community, because there's a lot of opportunity to learn about different issues from the start about just like how church-state separation affects so many communities across this country, how it intersects with so many different issues. And so, Alex, I'll just follow up with you directly. Can you share a little bit more? Because you did some research that has resulted in a recent blog post about that intersection with immigration that you mentioned. Plus, your project on your campus has taken a totally different direction too. So, say a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So I'm originally from Chicago, but I was in SoCal when I applied to the fellowship, and then I moved to NorCal for school. And so I kind of had to adapt my interests from like what I had seen on the local level, I guess, to what I saw in my region. Um, and so I did end up doing advocacy for religious minorities on my campus. So still pretty similar to what I originally had applied for. I guess with just like a broader scope of like understanding how it intersected with like reproductive rights, which was I was also really interested in, but I felt like where I could be most impactful was in advocacy for religious minorities. Um, and so on my campus, I did a project called Inclusivity Circle Voices of Faith, where we brought together different religious and cultural communities on campus to see how UC Santa Cruz could better its religious and cultural accommodations. I saw a stark need for that on campus, and so I was able to work with groups like our Muslim Student Association, a Hindu organization, a Buddhist organization on campus, to come together, and as well as secular voices. I think I will note as well. There were a fair amount of secular voices involved in that conversation um, on how we can make conditions better for religious minorities on campus, which looked like making more prayer spaces and making it more accessible, I guess. So Yeah, that
Yeah,
was one way. And I
yeah.
recently published a blog post with AU's help, thank you so much, about R1 visas, which was like a really interesting intersection that I didn't even know a lot about. And that's just an example of, I guess, how like AU's legal team was able to support me in that sense, and that like I
Hmm.
don't know, it's such like a vast community that there's someone who can like support you in learning something new,
Hmm.
especially for R1 visas, which doesn't have like a ton of information available on the
Yeah.
internet. Um, and so that I can you can read it. I can speak
Yeah,
more
definitely go
about
to the website to, we don't have time to talk about how R1 visas work, but go read Alex's blog post. It's just an example of how when you're in the fellowship, you can really just like take an idea, take a topic that interests you, and you could do your own research. You can talk to the experts at AU, and whether it's, doing activities in your community or writing about it for the blog, doing social media content, what have you, like you can find the ways that that you want to kind of communicate those messages out to the world. And Aiden, you've worked with our legal team actually too. You found an issue that you felt really strongly about and that affected students on your campus too. So tell us about what you've been working on.
Yes, absolutely. As Alex was speaking, I was grateful that I would be able to sing the praises of the legal team as well. So I think that, there are obviously like sort of big items that, a lot of people are able to identify as church state separation when it's like reproductive justice or, discrimination against LGBTQ people. But one intersection that I was really interested in was labor rights. And specifically, I've tried to get better at giving a short explanation. There's a ministerial exception, which essentially allows religious employers to categorize their workers as ministers, and then suddenly they don't need to provide them with the same workplace protections. And this is an issue that a lot of people don't know about, and it ends up hurting a lot of workers when this comes up in their legal proceeding and they don't know how to respond. Um, so fortunately, we have an AU legal team member who does this a whole lot and has a lot of experience with it. So I was able to invite him to Boston and hold an event where he was able to talk a bit about the history of the ministerial exception, what AU's vision of what this would look like, and how church-state separation is a labor rights issue, as well as all these other issues. Um, and of course, that ties into how students are being protected on campuses, and has a lot of sort of echoes of the ways that like religious language was used to defend segregation in education, which is another issue that a lot of people doesn't sort of come immediately to their minds. Um, and the last thing that I'll say on that is that at that event, I had somebody come up to me afterward and say, "Oh, I was actually looking at applying to like become a teacher at a religious school, as sort of like teaching world religions and stuff like that. And I had no idea that this is something that might affect me. So now I know what to ask about going into my interviews." And honestly, that one comment made the whole thing worth it. I think that there's a lot of room for people to be better informed about church-state separation. And yeah, it was really cool to sort of have AU support in getting that information out there.
Yeah, definitely. So we've talked about getting some support and learning from having staff speak at your events even. But a huge part of the fellowship is just being in community with the other fellows. So, we select a cohort of youth organizing fellows who meet every month virtually, who come to DC in the fall to really kick off the program with a whole weekend long training and just opportunity to get to know each other and get to know AU. And I'd love to hear, what has that been like? What has it been like to work with and learn from your peers in this program? Aiden?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what I would say is just if the only thing that the fellowship did is introduce me to the other fellows, it would absolutely be worth it. So many cool people who are doing so many like different and all amazing things. Um, I think that there are a lot of really cool things that the fellowship does. First, since the age group is not just like college students, and includes people who are maybe a few years out of college or doing something in graduate school, maybe law school. I know there have been some like divinity school people in the past. it's really cool to have the perspective of people who are doing like campus activism, but then also people who are like doing activism as their jobs, like after college, and just sort of like talking with people and hearing about the different experiences that they've had from all across the country has been incredible. I'm from Massachusetts, which is not exactly the front line when it comes to church-state separation. So figuring out like what my responsibility is relative to somebody who like some of our fellows who live in Texas, for example, like how we have to sort of speak differently about things has been really interesting and just really informative for my activism. Um, and also one of our meetings was with sort of national, like local organizers in AU's network. And that was an incredible opportunity to just like sit in a Zoom meeting for like 30 or 40 minutes with these people who've been doing like activism for 50 years and just like hear about all their experiences and how the sort of evolution of their fight for like public education without money going to religious schools has evolved. It was just incredible. I really can't like put it into words, but it was an amazing experience, and just being able to hear all the different forms that activism can take, and be able to talk with people who are doing that work is incredible. Honestly, really invaluable experience.
Thank you for shouting that out. I love that. Yeah, we had a meeting between our fellows and our volunteer leaders, many of whom, as Aiden said, have been doing this work for decades. And those are the kinds of opportunities that we try to create, of just sharing stories, sharing experiences. Attending the Summit for Religious Freedom is another opportunity for our fellows to not just connect with each other, but all kinds of activists for church-state separation that are a part of our movement. Alex, anything else to share about what it's been like to be a part of the cohort of fellows?
Yeah, Aiden really hit the hit the mark with there. I feel like everything he said I can almost reiterate. I think 2 points particularly that I touched upon. The fact that there's the fellow age range is like 18 to 25, I believe. And so learning from people from such different like age ranges, and literally again reiterating what Aiden said. But yeah, other fellows have like served as I'm probably gonna say one of the biggest inspirations throughout this fellowship. I think I've learned so much from just like other undergraduate students. To We have like a law student, or a former law student just graduated um in our cohort, which has just given me so much reference, I guess, on a national scale for my knowledge on church-state separation, the different forms of activism. Um, yeah, has been really influential. And again, like the vastness of AU's resources that ranges from like local activists to lawyers who are doing this on a national scale has been really fascinating, I guess, particularly like as a first gen student. This was like one of my first exposures to lawyers and like professionals in the field and in general, like in the I guess in the whole advocacy field on such a scale. And so it was definitely A, very informative for me, and B, like very inspirational, and seeing like where I could draw from what they had done to like, I don't know, strengthen my own advocacy, truly draw from them and learn for the better. And yeah, I love the fellows. Again, what Aiden said is completely true. Would have done this with just y'all, but oh, and also Alicia has been extremely instrumental in helping coordinate all of this, obviously. But yeah, the support that I've received from like the blog post to like advice on how to advocate on my campus, just having those one-on-one meetings has been so helpful, especially when you're feeling like lost, or like you hit a block in the road, admin's not responding or something. I think like the personal guidance that I've received has really also been the core of this fellowship, in that it enabled me to actually make change happen on my campus.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you for the shout out. You touched on a few things that I wanted to like elevate. One is, so Alex alluded to one-on-ones between me and each fellow, right? So as part of the fellowship, we have monthly group meetings, and then I meet one-on-one each month so we can check in about projects, see how things are going, see what we might do differently. You know, we kind of touched on this earlier, but projects can shift, things can change, we adapt. Organizing is never a linear process. So that's a big part of it. And also like finding mentorship and resources beyond just what I or the other fellows might provide is also part of it. So I definitely work to bring lots of our staff and experts to our fellowship meetings, right? So our fellows can hear from them, but also I make a lot of connections. You know, you should meet with so-and-so on our team and talk to them about their career. You know, one of our fellows wants to learn more about graphic design. So he's going to meet with our graphic designer to get like some one-on-one training on that as part of the fellowship. Once you're done with the fellowship, you can become an alumni of the program and stay connected to those resources and to that community. And community is such a big part of it. You know, a couple of months ago, we did like a mid-fellowship check-in. And one of our fellows said, you know, sometimes when we're organizing for these really difficult issues, when we see what we're up against, it's really hard. Like there's some bad days, you know, when you're advocating for things that affect you and your communities. But when we come to these meetings, when we are like together and get to just debrief and check in and talk about what's going on and talk about what we're going to do, that's such a light in what is sometimes darkness. That is such like a balm to so much of like the harm and the challenges that we can face in our communities. And so that's a really valuable part of the fellowship too, is just like in those meetings, we're not just doing the work, like we are being human and connecting too, you know, as part of the fellowship. So I want to make sure we touched on all those things. And we're going to shift to questions very soon. If you're thinking of questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box at any moment. But before we transition, I wanted to ask one more question, which is there just anything else that you think that people considering applying to the fellowship should know? What have we not talked about yet? Aiden?
Yeah, I think I would just add one thing. I think that you described it really well, but I would encourage people apply regardless of how qualified you feel like you are, and be open about like what you know and what you would want to learn. I think one thing that's been really amazing has been like, you know, I've been very open about like, oh, I have some like writing experience about church-state separation, but I want to like organize a physical event from like start to finish. And you know, that's been sort of part of our, you know, one-on-one check-ins with Alicia and sort of talking with the group, and building those skills is very consciously a part of the fellowship. So if that is a gap for you, do not let that discourage you. Yeah, that would be my one thing.
Awesome. Yeah. Applicants and the fellows, right, that are chosen come with very different backgrounds and experiences. And we value that in the fellowship. We don't want everyone to have the same experience, the same expertise, because we learn so much from each other. So absolutely, as Aiden said, apply. Alex, did you want to add anything that you think applicants should know?
Yeah, I'd second that firstly. I think when I initially, crazy to think that I was in all of your guys' spots about a year ago. But I definitely had like a lot of hesitancy over like if I was qualified. But like Alicia mentioned, it's a very diverse cohort every year. I think even like stepping into like the room in the beginning, I was so nervous that I was going to be like completely incompetent, but I think AU does a really good job of like fostering an environment where you're learning from one another. Like I said earlier, like some of the most valuable things I've taken so far from this fellowship, still have a few months to go, more to learn, has been from other fellows. Um and yeah, I think it's like sincerely like transformed me as an activist. And yeah, I don't know what to say more than that, but go for it.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm gonna briefly say a couple things about the application process and the program, just to give that overview before we go into questions, in case that helps preempt any questions that might get asked or prompt new ones. And so we are in the midst, right, of collecting applications. Completed application includes submitting an online form. You can find that at our website at this link, au.org/youthfellows. It's in the chat. And emailing me a resume. And then our staff review all the applications, and a subset of those folks are selected for a group interview. We have about a week where we'll schedule a couple group interviews. Applicants will be informed of when those are. It's kind of a unique process. We seek to simulate the experience of being in the fellowship in those group interviews. So you get some prompts and discussions to share about yourself, about what you want to do in the fellowship. You break into small groups and you talk with other applicants. And so that helps us get some more insight into our applicants' experience and what they want to get out of the fellowship. And we will decide by July 31st and notify all our applicants then on who is invited to join the next cohort. And throughout that whole process, from the written applications to the group interviews, there is both a staff and current fellow team. That is our committee that reviews and selects the next cohort among the applicants. And it all matters because what we're looking for is some experience working across difference and in collaboration with diverse leaders or groups. As you've heard, being part of this cohort is really important part of the experience. Some experience with advocacy or organizing in some way, very loosely defined, right? We just talked about this, about how people come from so many different backgrounds. We want to know that you know what it means to advocate. You've done something before and you want to really skill up. You want to advance your leadership in your community. You want to gain new tools, new skills in the fellowship. You understand what church-state separation is, but again, you want to learn more. You understand what AU's mission is, but you want to dig deeper. You have some form of leadership experience. You can work independently. This is really self-driven. Our fellows are all over the country, implementing their own projects in their communities. Sometimes there's collaboration, which is awesome, but we really rely on our fellows to be able to take initiative on their projects. I've said this before, like, you want to learn. That is so key to this experience. It's not just about doing activism, but learning. We want to see engagement and participation in the group interview, and just a commitment to the requirements of the fellowship. Again, at that link, there's a really detailed description about what the fellowship is, because I want to make sure it's really transparent and clear what you are getting involved with, what was expected in the fellowship, but also what resources you'll have. The fellowship starts in the fall, but in August, we kind of do the prep. We'll send you information, you'll sign the contract, we'll start booking travel for the trip to DC. In September, when we'll have our first virtual meetings as a group to get to know each other, get to know AU, lay a foundation so that we can really dig in with each other when we come to DC in October. And then throughout the year, it's those ongoing monthly full group meetings, time to connect, to check in, ongoing skills training. This month, we're learning about how to lobby. Past meetings have been about storytelling for organizers, policy and legal advocacy, topics like that. You have monthly meetings with me as the manager of the program, and just advocating for church-state separation, which looks like a lot of different things for our fellows. You meet one-on-one, right? You just have conversations. You are spreading what you know and what you've learned to your communities. You are writing. So you can write blog posts for our website, you can create social media content, and we write letters to the editor to newspapers as an important advocacy skill. And then fellows organize at least 2 events or activities in their community. You've heard about a couple. Alex organized an interfaith conversation on campus. Aiden brought one of our lawyers to speak about the ministerial exemption. There's so many ways this can look. Tabling, one of our fellows was tabling last week on their campus. Some people do webinars, workshops, like a training. One fellow did a sort of civic engagement training in their community. You can meet with elected officials. There's so many things that this can look like. And again, you'll be given so much time, space, resources to be able to figure out what that will look like for you. And now we have some time for questions from the audience. A couple questions have come in that are, I think, more for me, but I'll encourage Aiden and Alex to chime in if you have something to add. One asks, what type of resume are you looking for in the application? We are looking for information about any of your past experiences, paid or unpaid, right? Volunteer, internship, what have you, is super relevant. That relates to advocacy, to working on an issue in your community, to playing some kind of leadership role. We want to see those experiences through your resume. Someone asked about how our current fellows work to recruit and get other young people involved and to join. I already mentioned how we have a committee of both staff and fellows who select our new cohort. We really value a program that is both by and for, right, the people that it's for. And so we really value our fellows' perspectives in that process. Word of mouth is a huge way, that we spread the word about the fellowship. And so that's a big part of the kind of recruitment piece of it all. But I'm realizing the question might be, do fellows work to recruit new members of Americans United? And the answer to that is yes, as well. I don't know if either of you can speak to like how you communicate about AU's mission specifically through your work. Does that make sense? Like pointing to AU resources?
I can.
Yeah.
Well, one of the first things we did in the not our introductory meeting when we had the meet in DC was like learn how to do an AU pitch. And so I've been utilizing that ever since. I share to my friends quite often. And I guess this isn't quite answering the question. It was more of like a comment for before, but the way I found out about it was through the Secular Student Alliance newsletter. And so just like another reminder that like AU is very interconnected with all these other organizations, like both religious and secular, that do advocacy work. And that's like just particularly how I got my in with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like one of the skills that we work on is messaging, how to communicate effectively about church-state separation, and also just how to communicate in general, right? Like on an issue that you're passionate about, and how to both like share your perspective, maybe even parts of your story if you want to share that, and connect with another person. And that's a key part of our training. And I mentioned earlier that, our fellows all like kind of take the projects in different directions, but one of our fellows has been tabling and like providing information about AU, inviting people to sign up for AU's email list, etc. And another part of the fellowship that I didn't mention yet is that fellows can attend a conference with Americans United. Aiden, you did that. Both of you did, but Aiden, I'll invite you to say a little bit about that experience.
Sure, I was reminded of that
Since
while
Alan's just,
you were speaking.
talked. Yeah.
We did, Alex and I both went to New Orleans to table with AU at the Creating Change conference, which is like an LGBTQ organizing conference. I say "and," it's like it's very large. But that was awesome to just like kind of perfect your like 45-second pitch of like what AU is, what we do, and why it matters, while talking with a lot of people. And especially when it comes to speaking with young people, there were a lot of college students there that we were sort of talking to. And almost every single time the pitch would go like, we're with Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and this is like what we think is important. And the person would be like, yeah, like, kind of like didn't necessarily think of it, but then give it to them for like 20 seconds and they're immediately on board, which I think has been really cool to see. But also it's a really valuable skill, and it was a great opportunity to perfect that skill, at a conference by talking about AU. So yeah, that's all I have to
say. Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing that. I totally had not thought of that, and I'm sure there are other aspects of the program that we might not have covered, which is why checking out that website, reading through those details is really a great way to understand the full scope of the program, because it is part-time, but it is really as involved as you want it to be, and there are a lot of opportunities to go to conferences, get that mentorship, share your ideas through our blog, through social media, through these other avenues that you can get access to in the fellowship. And there's a lot you can make out of it if you do join the fellowship. We do not have any additional questions. And Alex, I know you have to hop soon too, but I do want to encourage anyone who's listening now, or if you're listening to this recording later, to please reach out to me with any questions at all. My email is johnson@au.org. I put that in the chat. There is still, time to apply. Our application is open until June 30th. And so if you come up with any questions during the process, please reach out. If you come up with questions after that deadline, please reach out. I'm here. And I'm really looking forward to reading the applications that come in. Thank you so much, Aiden, Alex, Kelly, our interpreter tonight. Thank you all for being here, and have a good night.